Welcome to the after show where I am still Joe Getcho.
And I'm still Mike White. This is an after show, so please make sure you've already watched or listened to our episode of Darkwing Duck Foul Play, written by Amanda Deibert, art by Carlo Lauro. Lauro?
Sure, yeah.
It's Italian. If you are in fact Italian, let us know how I did that wrong in the comments. The trade was published in 2024 by Dynamite Comics. The individual issues actually released in 23.
Yep. So very recent. So we gave a lot of spoilers in our episode, which we warned you about.
Honestly, a lot of spoilers for the TV show too. It basically, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Darkwing Duck at all. I think.
Yeah, it's not really a spoiler, and there's nothing that necessarily happens that's like, oh my gosh, you just ruined, me binge watching the show or anything like that, because they're all episodic.
I'm a big believer in spoilers have a shelf life too, where it's like, so somebody could play Final Fantasy VII right now, and they're probably going to know before they start it that Aerith or Eris dies in the game. Like, it's been, 30 years almost or something since it came out in 97. So at this point, it's kind of like, if you don't know, I'm sorry, but this has existed in media for a very long time. So it's kind of just accepted that, like, you're probably going to see spoilers. Mm-hmm. When it's something more recent like this, I think we want to be a little more careful to warn people. So
right. Yeah, if it's like within a year of something coming out, then be a little sensitive to that. I mean, some people can't wait a day or literally the day something comes out to spoil it. Like when I was watching The Acolyte and the season finale of that came out, or now we have Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, and I'm just like, nope, when I see something that's related to these properties, I don't read it, I don't watch it, I don't want to catch a spoiler, because it seems like a lot of trailers nowadays are basically just full of spoilers, and I don't know why, but I just avoid them.
I get that we want to get butts in seats, but don't show me the whole movie.
Yeah.
That's really not what I want from a trailer. So.
Well, someone else who's been in media for a while is Amanda Deibert, or Deibert, or one of those variations. So if you know, let us know if I mispronounced your name.
That's right.
But hopefully I'm somewhere correct. Anyway,
I think you said Deibert first, and I just followed suit with you. So
yeah,
I assumed you knew.
I just took a guess. So she is an author, actress, producer, screenwriter, and best-selling comic book and graphic novel writer. So she has a lot of credentials. She actually started screenwriting in college, and she started dating a comic book illustrator named Kat Staggs, who later became her wife. So she got into comic books by meeting an illustrator and has maintained that long relationship. So she worked for a female comedy website, which is now defunct. She created a weekly webcomic along with Kat, which combined, Amanda's writing skills and Kat's illustration. So it was cool that they got to, work together like that. The webcomic, it's kind of funny, in an interview with her, she shared some embarrassing personal stories, like one where she was a teenager, she was hiking and needed to use the restroom, so she went off the trail, but then accidentally fell off a cliff while trying to avoid being seen by other people, and then she ended up dangling from a tree branch with her pants around her ankles.
That's terrible.
So definitely very funny webcomic that they had going on there.
Oh my gosh.
She also created some comedy videos dealing with some things that are very personal, such as grief. So she made this Father's Day video that humorously portrayed her turning into Batman while discussing her grief. And basically the video featured her crying with her mascara smudging to resemble Batman's mask. So it's like a serious topic, but, a funny take on it. But this video actually gained attention at DC Comics, and an editor who is familiar with her webcomic and Kat Staggs' work reached out and invited her to write a Wonder Woman story. So that's how she got into professional comic book writing.
Wow.
So this, of course, was her way of getting into the industry. So she's written comic books. She's written Rocket and Groot for Marvel and for Scholastic Books. She's written Star Wars hyperspace stories for Dark Horse. She has written for DC Superhero Girls, Batman and Scooby-Doo, Harley Quinn romances, DC's The Doomed and the Damned, Teen Titans Go, Batman and Harley Quinn, Wonder Woman Agent of Peace, Wonderful Women of the World, Wonder Woman 77, and work in Love is Love, a New York Times #1 bestseller. So a lot for DC. And then also, of course, Darkwing Duck, Red Sonja Black, White, and Red, which were both for Dynamite.
Okay.
She also worked for a million for Penguin Random House's McClellan and Stewart, and John Carpenter's Tales for Halloween Night, volumes 2 through 10, and Death Mask for Storm King Comics. So I usually don't go into a lot of detail with the writers about all of their different works, but I wanted to on hers because it's just such a wide variety.
It is. I was
going to
say
that are just so completely unrelated from each other that it's kind of like, how can you
Red
do all these
Sonja
different things?
is like high fantasy. Darkwing Duck is obviously what we read today. It is what it is. I mean, you're doing superhero stuff. You're doing Star Wars. You got Rocket and Groot in there. John Carpenter's stuff, that's probably just straight up horror.
Yeah.
Like, wow. That's a lot of range.
Yeah. Well, and she's also worked in television with writing credits on the animated series Hot Wheels, Let's Race, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe. She's written for various variety shows for CBS, Sci-Fi, and Hulu. She was 4 years as the writer for former Vice President Al Gore's annual climate broadcast, 24 Years of Reality. So again, just quite a variety.
Yeah.
She was also an actress where she won the Crimson Screen Horror Film Fest Award in 2015 for Best Actress in the melodramatic whodunit horror romp called Helltown. So again, just all over the place.
It really is.
So in writing Darkwing Duck, she grew up with the 90s cartoons like we did. So, of course, she was like, when they asked her to work on Darkwing Duck, she's like, well, yeah, of course, I want to do this, absolutely. She previously collaborated with the editor on a Red Sonja story that was written by her and illustrated by Kat Staggs. So there was some familiarity in there. During her interview, she said, it's that thing where if you don't mess it up too badly and people like what you're doing, they come back to you with other jobs if you're lucky. And boy, was she lucky.
Yeah, I would say so.
Not just once, but twice, or probably more than that, with, getting into the industry and then getting the opportunity to write Darkwing Duck, and just like a really cool journey.
Can you imagine if your first professional assignment, like in comic books, was writing one of like the top, 6 characters or whatever? Because you got on the DC side, you have Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and then Marvel, you've got Spider-Man's probably the top one, and then you're looking at what, like maybe Avengers or Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, those guys. But that's kind of like digging up plutonium in your backyard. I mean, that's insane.
So she's also a mother of a 9-year-old, and so it was cool because she got to binge watch the 90s cartoons with her daughter as research for the comic. So that's also why we get a lot of these callbacks, is because she literally did go back through all the cartoons and pick up on things to get the tone of the show, get the way the characters were supposed to be, and put some callbacks in there. So that was really cool. And also just being able to show her daughter that there's a fun side of her job. Like, not a lot of parents or people in general get to do that, where they're like, hey, look at this thing I get to do at work, and isn't it cool?
Yeah, that's awesome. Especially I feel like this comic would be perfectly fine for a 9-year-old too, where you could show it to him. It's not too violent. It's got all the kind of slapstick cartoon violence and stuff like that. So Red Sonja, you probably wouldn't give to your little girl. It's a little more, on the adult side. But that's cool that she would have something that she could kind of show to her kid. And also just watching cartoons with them is work. Like that's the dream right there.
Yeah.
Like, just let me watch cartoons and get paid.
That'd be awesome. So yeah, if you look up on YouTube, there's a great hour-long interview with her. It's on a channel that's called Near Mint Condition. Just wanted to give a little plug for that, just because it's an hour long, and she answers a lot of questions about her career and writing Darkwing Duck, and being a fan of that show and those kinds of things. So it was cool to check out when researching for the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I, in my research on the artist, I initially was not able to find much of anything because this is yet another one that doesn't have a Wikipedia page. But I did find an interview with Carlo Lauro about his work on Darkwing Duck. So this is
nice.
very relevant to what we're doing today. And they actually asked him a lot of questions about his career. So I've got a little bit to go into. And forgive me, the website that I found escapes me, but if you search for Carlo Lauro interview, you can find most of this information online. He's an Italian artist that was born in the 80s, just like us. He was actually born in 85. So we got a couple years on him. And he's a fan of most of the media that we grew up with. He describes himself as an avid fan of Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Dragon Ball, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and of course the Disney Afternoon. He was like, I loved the whole Disney Afternoon. So he talked about like DuckTales and Chip and Dale and Tailspin and of course Darkwing Duck. That was kind of like the really iconic block right there. Later on they would push DuckTales out, and I think maybe Goof Troop came in as another show there. But yeah, he was a big fan of that. So early in his career, he dismissed the idea of being a professional artist, but eventually he self-published a zombie parody comic in Italian in 2014. And so then he started to work for all the major Italian comic book publishers, including Panini Press, which I would say, is that offensive that we have like an Italian company named Panini, but it's from Italy. So, and
maybe that's just the family name, that no relation to the food.
No relation to the food. I don't know. But I could go for a panini right now because they are delicious. And
the food or the family?
That's not that kind of podcast. And Arancia Studio, the latter company got him into contact with Disney. So I guess Disney has comic publishers in various countries throughout the world. And so Arancia is one that they publish comics through overseas.
Okay.
They're in Italy. So that's kind of how he made that connection. So his earlier work for Disney included many of Carl Barks's creations, or the Duck. I wrote Duck.World. Duck.World is Howard the Duck in Marvel Comics. It's the Duckverse for the Carl Barks stuff. So I got that wrong in the notes. The Duckverse characters like Daisy and Donald Duck, and he actually is the first person to write a solo comic about Daisy, of all things. So it was a series called like Daisy in Paris, I think, or something like that. But eventually, because of that, he landed his dream job of working on Darkwing. So the Duckverse has a long, long tradition in comics dating back to the 1940s, and so Lauro was kind of proud to become part of that artistic tradition.
Awesome.
Yeah. So one thing about Italy, I know that they have an expo every year where they have, their version of a Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. It is there's much more prestige and honor given to the artists than what we get here in the United States. It's like invitation only, so not anybody can set up a booth. And they're going to give you this huge display where it's like all your art and, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Whereas our Comic-Cons are more kind of like, let's get people through. Yeah. They're doing more like art exhibitions of, because I guess Italy is so into like art and culture and music and all those things. So it really is like in his country would be considered more of like, this is almost a prestigious thing that you're following in these classical comic book artist tradition. So he also did extensive research before starting his work penciling, just like our writer, including he actually got his hands on original character sheets for the animated series.
Oh, nice.
He rewatched the entire show on Disney Plus, and he even reread all of Darkwing's previous comic book adventures.
Wow.
So like everything he could consume on the character he did before going into this. So he says that collectively his favorite villains are the Fearsome Five, and given the question, Gizmo Duck or Darkwing, he said no contest, DW is the best.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, why are you asking the penciler of Darkwing Duck which one he likes better? Besides penciling for Dynamite, he continues to have creator-owned projects like Ghost Gun, which he describes as a spaghetti western manga inspired by stories that he loved in Dragon Ball and One Piece. So spaghetti western, if you don't know, is... For some reason, when Westerns became really big in the United States, there were a lot of Italian directors that also got into producing these Westerns. And so that's the spaghetti Western.
Oh.
Basically is the Italian
that would be
created,
offensive.
You would think it would be, yeah. But that's like the name of a whole era and genre of cinema. So I guess he's doing a manga that's kind of like that. I don't really know what like the tone differences are between how we would do a Western and how they do, but yeah. Interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much what he's been up to. It's really cool that both of these creators really dug in and did so much research on the characters, because I think that has a lot to do with why we rated the comic so well.
Well, and I was thinking that when I was researching the writer,
Mhm.
is everything that I was finding in there, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, this makes sense why I like this so much. It's like you really took the time to go through it. You not only went through it as an assignment, but you had fun with it, being able
Right.
to rewatch this and also show it to somebody new as well, like showing it to your child and being like, check out this, animated series that I watched when I was your age, that kind of thing.
That's something that's kind of fun too, is introducing, because this cartoon was intended for kids when we were growing up, but
Right.
still intended for kids. So you can kind of transplant it to younger generations and go, hey, what do you think of this? Like, I've watched Animaniacs with my nieces before, and now I have noticed that there are a lot of adult jokes that just went woo right over my head whenever I was a kid. There's one about looking for fingerprints that was definitely, I was like, whoa, I can't believe they said that.
I don't think so.
But yeah, but but watching it with them, they don't pick up on any of that stuff, and they just like the wacky comedy and stuff, which
Right.
of course is what I liked. But it's kind of fun to have that experience with them sometimes, and you kind of get that experience of like watching it through a kid's eye again, when the things that they notice, you're like, oh yeah, that would have been my favorite part when I was that age too, or something like that. So I'm sure that a lot of passion went into this project, and honestly, I'm really hyped to read the further volumes. Like, I hope you get
Yeah.
all of them, because
I have them on pre-order.
yeah, I'm gonna keep borrowing them from you and keep reading them just for fun, because they're really enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I gave it a 5, is because I thought, for me, like, a 5 is if it's something that I'm just hooked on that I need to get more of. Because after I read
Yeah.
this, I kind of took a little chance on it, but after I read it, I was like, this is great, and I have to have
it's
more.
so
And so then I started looking into, okay, what's been coming out? Well, actually, this is the first thing out in a long time. Okay, we're starting fresh. And then I found out that there's more coming out later, so I went ahead and pre-ordered them right away. And so when it came time to figure out, well, what, banana score do I want to put to this, it was like, well, I'm already invested in this, so it's definitely got to be a 5.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. I wanted to leave a little bit of room for them to go up, I guess. But, I mean, I really can't find anything technically wrong with the story. I don't want to be that guy, like the Academy Awards never give big Oscars to, or for the longest time, you had to be a certain genre, or like you couldn't be a genre film if you were going to get an Oscar. I think Lord of the Rings was one of the first ones to really break out of that that template of like, oh, we're very much a fantasy genre film, but it's going to get like Best Picture. That's
Right.
not. Somewhere in my head, I'm like, well, it's not classy to give a perfect score to like a comedy or whatever. But
A cartoon.
honestly, it's so good. It's
Yeah.
just It's
It's
so
just
good.
something about the character is just like so intriguing and fun, and it's like you get to see him be a bumbling buffoon, but he actually does get to show off his skills here and there as well. And then
Yeah.
when he's not able to, you have Gosling, who kind of comes in and he's like trying to protect her, but then she ends up protecting him in the end, and it's this like
Right.
cool dynamic between them. And then you add some of the auxiliary characters like Launchpad and his goofy things that he does and not being able to land very well. And then you add Honker and the Muddlefoots for some more comedy relief, and it's like everybody that they interact with, the story just kind of writes itself when
Yeah.
you have certain characters in a room together. And once you start getting the villains, it's like, well, each villain has its own specific shtick, that what they do is going to be very nefarious, and it's going to put people in danger and jeopardy, but a lot of times it has a very wacky or goofy solution that can be something practical or something completely cartoony, like
Yeah.
an atomizer, where his gun will just turn things into autumn. And then he gets to make puns after that, where he like zaps Busher
Yeah.
and he falls over and he's like, oh, see you next fall, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Looks like it's time for you to
Take a
the
fall. Yeah.
I will say I heard the voice actors' voices while I was reading this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure. I mean, when Megavolt's speaking, I was like, yeah, it's Robert Paulson. Whenever Darkwing's speaking, it's Jim Cummings, and I really heard the character voices, and the way an adaptation of something that's like animated or TV is not being done well is if you're reading it and you try to do that and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really high praise too, where it's like, okay, everybody was in character for the whole thing, and that's I mean, kind of hard to nail. I think we've proven by
Yeah.
some of our reviews in the past. So
Well, and it's just so wacky and creative, and like I was remembering, I was going to mention it during the episode, but Bushroot, in his I think origin episode, he has like an assistant, or there's some other doctor on the scene, and her name is Rhododendron, and so there's all these like
forgot about that.
there's like all these plays on words and things with a lot of the characters that like James Bond would do in kind of a sexual way that
Right.
Darkwing Duck does in like a humor, wacky, goofy, fun kind of way, like Drake Mallard, and he's a duck person, and you have like I don't know who else is named aptly like
We've
that.
got
but
Fenton Quackshell, who's Gizmo Duck.
he's another one.
Fenton Quackshell. I don't know what Stegmut's story is, but apparently he was a duck that turned into a dinosaur. That's an episode I need to.
That
I
must
need
have
to
been a
go back and
DuckTales, because
watch.
I don't think we get any explanation for that in
for that in
Darkwing Duck.
Darkwing Duck. Yeah, maybe it was. It is interesting how this is almost like the. I mean, it's really not, but it's almost like the Deep Space Nine of the Duckverse, right? Because the original stuff is like Donald Duck and his nephews having adventures, and then Uncle Scrooge is kind of like the mean uncle that's causing problems for them with his greediness, and he's more vilified. Then the spinoff becomes DuckTales, which is kind of our next generation, and then we spin off from the spinoff, which is Darkwing Duck, and that would be our Deep Space Nine. But it's cool how successful it's been over the years, and that they've kind of just like fleshed out this whole world of characters.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's kind of weird that we don't ever see Donald on DuckTales. Like, do the nephews just stay with their uncle all the time?
No, we see Donald
I guess.
on
Oh,
DuckTales.
we do. Okay,
Mhm.
I didn't know. The old show, I don't remember seeing him like at all. But,
Yeah,
but maybe
he would come back temporarily, or there's like one episode where we get to see him in the Navy, and he like
Oh.
completely screws things up, and
Oh, okay.
as Donald Duck would do. But I don't think we ever see him in Darkwing Duck at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe there's like probably a crossover with DuckTales
Yeah.
people or with Scrooge, but
I mean, the crossovers they do. I mean, again, it's a good way of doing it, which is what they did with the Trek shows in the '90s, where they would have a little tiny bit of crossover, right? But they basically let each show retain its individuality and stay distinct. That's kind of like DuckTales and Darkwing Duck, right?
Yeah.
Like, they are definitely in the same world, but they don't really cross over that much, and they definitely have their own tone. Whereas DuckTales is more like an adventure, kind of like Indiana Jones takeoff with some wackiness and comedy mixed in. Darkwing Duck is very much the superhero genre, so it's doing its own distinct thing. So it's cool because it just makes this whole like universe feel more fleshed out, I guess. Like, there's different aspects to it.
yeah, so my wife and I started rewatching DuckTales the original, or I should say
Oh,
watching,
nice.
because I had never actually seen it.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so it actually is like a really fun show. There's like a little bit of continuity that they'll keep here and there, which is cool to see.
Okay.
But like it's the same sort of thing where they get into wacky hijinks and things happen. But the stories are interesting, and the characters are just like, I don't know, they're so believable. They're so relatable.
Yeah.
They're so, like just fun to watch, the hilarity that ensues from there. And like, we're actually having a lot of fun just rewatching DuckTales.
That's awesome.
So it's really cool because like I've seen the modern one, the modern DuckTales they did a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm going back and watching the original, but my wife is rewatching the original, and so I'd like to show her the newer version once we get through the original to see if she thinks that they're similar, or how that well they translated to kind of more modern times and things like that, because
Right.
I thought the show was really good, especially the stuff what they did with Darkwing Duck, like setting up for maybe there could be a new Darkwing, and maybe there's a new Negaduck, because of things that happen in the episode. So I'm
It's a
excited
shame
to
that-
see what happens.
It's a shame that hasn't gone anywhere yet. I would hope that
Hopefully
somebody
someday.
at Disney picks that up eventually, because these are really the Disney properties that I care about. Like, when I'm playing Kingdom Hearts or whatever, I would love for them to go to St. Canard. That would be super cool, instead of
Yeah.
it being so like movie centric, which is kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason what they decided to do, but when Disney in the Afternoon was really kind of my Disney, as far as I remember watching Chip and Dale, not as religiously, but I watched it. I watched Goof Troop. I watched Darkwing Duck. Tailspin, I don't think I was quite as into. I just remember Don Carnage, the like, is he like a fox or whatever? He's like a, I don't know. It's real weird because it's like all Jungle Book characters, but they're like fighter pilots, and stuff. It's a
weird
very
idea.
strange idea. But you've got
But it's memorable.
Yeah, it is memorable. So I remember all those shows really fondly. So yeah, we really can't recommend this enough, honestly.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of Darkwing Duck, or even if you're not, like, I think it's just a fun read. So
yeah. All right, well, that
right.
should be pretty good for this after show. So make sure, again, you tell us what you think on social media and in the comments, and do the liking and subscribing and all of the regular commercials that we give you during the episode. Just insert them here and just pretend that we told you all that stuff again.
That's right, and stay tuned because we might have a little bit more Darkwing Duck bonus content coming your way in the future. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
We like Darkwing Duck because they have